Hello and welcome to my first YouTube video where I'll be talking about a thread that I posted recently. So if you prefer video content, this is the place to be. The thread is about 16 things that I've noticed that projects can do better or should do or might consider doing. And the idea is to help both guide project founders and also help investors to recognize projects that are doing things well and help them also make suggestions because in this space, investors are not just separate from the project, they're also kind of a part of the project and helping to build it out. So if they know what works and what doesn't, they might be able to help out the projects that need it and deserve it. And the first pattern that I'd like to talk about is a kind of meta pattern, which is a willingness to say no and yes to the right things that can help your project. In the NFT space, we all know that there's a lot of copying that happens. People adopt things from other projects, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I know that there can be a lot of controversy around people copying other projects' innovations, but actually, the fact that these innovations can spread so rapidly is a good thing and is a good feature of this space, I believe. But the thing is, as a founder, you need to make decisions about what is actually going to make sense for your project. You can't just adopt everything that every other project is doing, if only because there's just too much stuff. It's impossible. So when you're choosing which things to copy, it's important that you think about what is the context of your project, why are you doing this project, what are you trying to achieve with this project, and therefore does this pattern that you're looking at actually fit in the vision that you have for your project? If you don't do that, then you'll end up with a hodgepodge of random things that might make sense, might not make sense, kind of pull in different directions. There's a kind of a principle from strategy, and there's a really good book on this called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. That good strategy is about saying no to most things and saying yes to the few things that are going to give you the most leverage to actually have the impact that you're trying to have. And that's definitely true for NFT projects as well. So be sure to, when looking at this list of tips or any other kind of content that suggests things that you might do on your project, to really think about, does this actually make sense for my project? Even if the other person is passionate that you must do this thing, they might be wrong. And ultimately, you're the one who's going to need to live and breathe this project for months or years. So you need to be comfortable that this actually makes sense for your project. The second tip I have is defining your ideal member. What that means in the context of NFT projects is this is especially true for club-like NFT projects, but I think it can be true also for other kinds. This is kind of a re-adaptation of an idea that is everywhere in the startup world, which is you need to know what your ideal customer is. You need to know who you're trying to attract because trying to create a message that convinces everybody to join your project never actually works. The worst kind of product is the one that's designed for everyone. What you want is to know what are the specific customers that you want or the specific investors that you want. Focus your message on these people and market to them. In the case of an NFT project, that also means designing the Discord, the community, the processes, and all these other things that you might adapt into the project to serve those ideal members and attract them and make them feel like, oh, yes, I'm home. This is the Discord where I want to hang out. This is the effect that you want to have. But in order to have that effect, you need to know who the hell you're trying to attract. If you're just guessing or like not guessing at all and just copying things without thinking, you're going to not really attract anybody specific. And people who do end up on your Discord or looking at your webpage might like it and they might not like it, but it's kind of random because like you haven't really thought through a sort of like ideal person that you want to attract. The third tip is to actually have a unique profile picture in your collection to actually deliver that to users. Now, you might be confused why I'm talking about this, but there are projects that launch without this. And first of all, a disclaimer, both of the projects I mentioned here, Zen Academy and Llama Boost, are projects, or Llamaverse, are projects that I'm bought into. I'll put a disclaimer with my transparency report in the description. This is not a suggestion that you should buy it. I wouldn't buy them right now, but they are projects that I'm familiar with, and that's why I'm talking about them. So Zen Academy, which is a project started by Zeneca33, who's a big influencer, has, instead of having a unique profile picture for each person who holds an NFT, has these two letters, one for the Genesis, the sort of cheaper membership, and one for the more premium exclusive membership. That's okay. It's done reasonably well. This minted at 0.03. This one is still available to buy at 3.3 ETH, depending on an application that you need to submit. So it's clearly done all right. But my belief is that one of the powers that NFT projects have is the emotional engagement that we get with the items. So to use another example, Llama Boost, which started with different pictures than these, also has done remarkably well considering its starting point. I mean, silver was actually a free mint, which is now trading at 1.75 ETH. That's kind of amazing. And the gold boost costs somewhere between zero point 0.5 and 1.95 ETH back when NFT Llama was taking those taking applications for memberships directly via Discord and just receiving payments in ETH without even giving an NFT, which was a kind of funny beginning for the project. Llamaverse realized fairly early on, so NFT Llama realized fairly early on that the trading activity of the project was impacted by the fact that there wasn't an actual profile picture. And that also, from a marketing perspective, and NFT Llama is a very skilled marketer as well as a skilled trader, you're missing out when you don't actually have a profile picture for people to display. There's a lot of people who are in this Llamaverse Discord, and they've not been visible because there wasn't actually a way for them to display that on Twitter. I intend, once I mint my animated llamas, which I hope will be suitable for my online identity, to start using it as my profile picture. And that will be free advertising for the Llamaverse project, which if you don't actually have a profile picture, you miss out on that. But more than that, I also think there's an element of emotional engagement that is important. So even if as a project, and some serious projects might be like, I'm talking about businesses that are looking at using NFT projects to launch something, they might not be so interested in running like in the kind of advertising thing and having people use a profile picture that's connected to their project. But the other side of it is also the emotional engagement. And like, okay, these cans are nice and stuff, but it's hard to get emotionally engaged with something where you know that everybody else has the exact same thing. And same for those letters. They're nice, but they're not so engaging. Whilst when you own, and these are previews from the sort of sneak peeks from the project, when you own something like this, it's easier to start to feel emotionally attached. There's an artistic element. People just react like this. Like that's how humans are. We like art. We get emotionally attached to it. And when we're attached to it, we're less likely to just sell it in a huff or to just trade it purely rationally. That makes it more sticky. That makes it more engaging as a kind of activity. It makes it more fun as well. So I think that projects that don't go to the effort to have some unique art are making a mistake and losing out on both the marketing elements and the emotional engagement of investors, both of which are I think, powerful features that make NFTs superior to shares in many ways. So I would recommend that even if you're about to launch your project and it's quite serious and you think like, why should I pay an artist to go and, design some kind of pictures and stuff? I'm running I don't know, a wind farm offshore and I'm funding that with NFTs. Why should I go and design some art around that? Well, think about both the emotional engagement and the marketing side of things, which can help you build more attention for the project. And that might decide you that actually perhaps it's worth engaging with an artist and going to that effort. The next step that I have is to go for a slow mint rather than a hype mint. I've written about this in some other threads before, and I've seen it unfold a few times now, and I'm more and more convinced that going for a more slow, deliberate process of building up the project is much more likely to lead to successful projects. That doesn't mean that hype mints never lead to successful projects, but if you want to maximize your chances, actually a slower, more deliberate process is the way to go. Now, not all projects depend on having a strong community. Some models don't actually require that, but if there is any dependency on having a strong community, then you'll want to consider this. That the quicker you build something, the more disconnected it is, and the more likely it is to fall apart. The more you take your time to build something like a community slowly by slowly attracting the right people and figuring out how to tweak the proposition to really make it fit with your ideal members, the more likely they are to stick around when things get more difficult, when price goes down or the market is in bear mode or there's some kind of bad news that comes out about your project. Now, obviously, you may take the view that you don't care what happens in secondary trading to your project, whether the price goes up or down. Once you've done the mint, you've got your model of how you're sharing value, and it's only the long term that you're caring about. But the reality is that you will probably care. It is hard not to care when people who are invested in your project start banging down the door, or when they start just selling your project and the price goes down. Just ask any CEO of a public company, and they'll probably tell you that although they're supposed to just focus on the long-term value of the project, of the company, they probably care very much about short-term price moves because their job depends on that. And it's just it's just the environment that they live in. It's difficult to ignore something like the price, the valuation of your project. But if you have a strong community that believes in your project, that has been accreted over time and is made of ideal members who really like your project for reasons other than the fact that it's just about to go to the moon, then you're less likely to see the kind of wild price swings that happen when the project is mostly made of people looking for short-term gains. And to do that, you have to build a community slowly rather than basing it on hype. Another useful tip for founders, I believe, is to leverage rarity. Now, it's easy again to think, well, it doesn't really matter very much. The art is just there as a placeholder. Like, who cares? Whatever. I'm running a business that's, I don't know, milking cows or something. And what do I care about the art and the rarity and so on? But that's part of what makes NFTs such a powerful fundraising model, is how they're leveraging the fun that you have collecting things, the collectibles type of angle, in order to make the project more successful and or make the project more engaging. Now, if we look at some projects that I own, Crypto Coven is a good example there, particularly because they actually officially decided to shun Rarity, whereas so many other projects were obsessed about finding Rarity rankings and trying to buy NFTs that have more Rarity ranking and valuing those more and so on. They kind of thumbed their nose at that and said, no, we're not going to have like any kind of trades that are more rare. We're just going to have, we don't want the best trades to be more rare. We want people to be able to enjoy all the good trades. So they really messed with the statistical rarity. However, there is still an element of rarity that comes in with CryptoCoven. And you can see that if you get more involved in the project, which I did, and I minted some and I bought some from the floor. And this is one that I bought from the floor. And all the CryptoCoven witches are really beautiful, I think. The art is really wonderful. The style is unique in a way that I find really appealing. But they're not all equally beautiful. And the first three here are ones that I minted, and they're good. Like, they're nice. They're like, they're very appealing in many ways and unique. And then this fourth one is one of the ones that I minted, and not very surprising to me because of the color scheme, because of the accessories that she has, because of just her general look. She looks just very elegant and has a sort of like really more like something style. And because of that, this is the witch on which I've had more offers. Like back when the floor was still around 0.1, I was getting 0.3 offers on her. And then I decided, you know what, no, I'm not selling that because I really like her. Even though I could de-risk my investment immediately, I don't want to sell her. I got emotionally engaged into the project even more because I minted one that looked particularly appealing to me. And since then, I've had people approach me, ask me whether this one is for sale. That hasn't happened for any of the other witches that I minted or that I bought. It's happened only for this one because she's the one that's most aesthetically appealing. As a counterexample, you may think that making everything rare looking is a good idea, but actually, if you take Omnimorphs, which is a project that I own, which I don't particularly like owning, but I bought it and so it is. They look quite cool, but the problem there is that they all look cool and they all look equally cool. They all look kind of like weird and amazing, and that's nice, but there's not enough of a difference between them. It's very hard to tell at first glance, oh, I really like this one. It's either you like all of them or you don't really like any of them. So there's no difference in their emotional engagement with one or the other. So when I say leverage rarity, I don't mean necessarily go for the statistical rarity where it's all about which traits are more rare and so on, but make enough of the traits emotionally appealing that people will engage with them. and feel like a special emotional engagement to them. A good example of that as well is on Lazy Lions, and how, like, a good example of how the statistical rarity is really not what matters is that on Lazy Lions, the crown and the party hat have effectively the same rarity. There's about 100 of each of those. And those two lines might seem very similar to you. And yet the crown floor is about 13.5 ETH, whilst the party hat floor, which is actually slightly more rare, is about 3.5 ETH, because crowns are just something that is very emotionally appealing to people who want to buy lions. Of course, there's a Lion King, so a Lion King with a crown is just that much more compelling. So that's a good feature of NFTs, and you want to try and design your project so that you leverage that, the fact that people are going to really like certain things and going to value them more. And I don't think you need to make them more statistically rare. You just need to make sure there are things that people are going to like and emotionally engage with, because of those other things they will buy and then keep and use as their identity. And then there's the next tip, which is kind of the reverse of the previous one, or like related to the previous one, which is be careful about adding traits that are just kind of lame. It's easy maybe when you're rushing through the project and trying to come up with hundreds of different traits to just brainstorm any ideas that come up and just say, yeah, sure, we're going to have this and that. Like, well, yeah, why not this thing? Like, let's have a little, whatever, like, anything ridiculous. And the problem with that is that if you do end up applying traits that are just kind of lame, people end up not valuing those traits so much, and they end up devaluing your whole project and dragging the floor down for your project because they don't like these traits. A great example for me is in the Lazy Lions project. There were some traits that were always at the bottom, always near the floor, and you always find some of them. The floaters, like, which are just weird. Why would a lion have floaters? It doesn't make any sense. The bunny ears just were constantly being sold at the floor. Here's more floaters and horns. Horns were also like, what kind of lion has horns? It just doesn't make much sense for a lion to have bull horns. And people just ended up, even if the lion overall looks cool, this lion without the bunny ears would be valued much higher than with it. And whilst this is not a huge thing, it's not like a big deal to have this. It's not going to sink your project. It does mean that if you have traits that are lame, those will always end up on the floor. They will be less likely to be bought by people, and they will be more likely to drag down your floor price and make the project look less successful than it is. So I would advise projects to avoid traits that are lame, which sounds obvious in hindsight, but is maybe not that obvious. Here's a pattern that is quite unusual at the moment. I've only seen one project do it. I'm sure they're not the only one, but they're the only one I'm aware of, which is naming the NFTs. This is still doubling down on this idea of emotional engagement, getting people to care about the NFTs that they own of your project, which I believe is a good feature of NFTs as a fundraising mechanism. Crypto Coven has done that really well. They went and AI generated some names for their witches, and it's just much more interesting to care about. Like, it's much more interesting to think that you're buying, soursop indistinct sand dollar, or myrtle of the orrery, or all of the cold. It just feels that much nicer. That vanilla, the well dressed, like, it just makes me happy to look at that, and I'm like, yeah, cool. Yeah, I want to buy Lily the Suggestive. Like, that sounds really cool. Why not? Whilst you compare that to, I'm going to beat up on Omnimorphs again, but this is true of almost every project out there. They have this kind of pattern of having the name plus a number. I'm sorry, but Omnimorph 400 is not as interesting for me to buy as Lily the Suggestive or Omnimorph 8118. And this is true of many projects that are successful. There's not an essential pattern that you must do, but I think it's something that I'd like to see more projects do. And now that I've experienced what it's like to buy and trade those named witches, I feel a kind of little pang in my heart whenever I'm trading another project and I see, oh, it's, even Meta Angel 9234, and just Meta Angel 9234 is not as interesting to me as Lily of the Orrery or whatever name the random generator might generate. So I would suggest that as a kind of thing to copy that I'd like to see much more in many more projects, as an idea that as a founder you can adopt for your project if it makes sense for you. Still going on the theme of emotional engagement, which is clearly something that I care very much about, we've got descriptions. This is another little detail where you can let the personality of your project come through. Crypto Coven is again the first project that I saw doing that, and you can see that each witch has a description. You're a witch from the silver of the eclipse, from the silver of the eclipse. You bottle stars for your nightstand. It's just, an evocative bit of poetry that makes you more likely to be attached to this particular witch. You're a witch sculpted from the clay of the oracle's pool. People who engage with this project, who are likely to like this project, will resonate with this kind of detail. Obviously, if you're trying to market to crypto tech bros, you're not going to have that kind of description. You're going to want to have something that's more appealing to them. And another project I've seen done this really well is Meta Angels, which, disclaimer, I'm invested in Meta Angels. I own about 13 of them. You can find the link to my transparency report in the description of the video. They took a very different angle. So whereas Crypto Coven is very whimsical, so you're a witch unfathomably feared, you make your own jewelry from trinkets and dried hearts, Meta Angels went more with the angel theme, appealing to the fact that people who buy those angels, who buy into the project, want to help others. That's one of their reasons for buying. And so they might see themselves as bringing something, some kind of angelic feature to the people that they connect with. And so they added this: you are an angel of quiet, you're a calming presence, providing peace and stillness to others. Or you're an angel of shared meals, you bring people together, breaking bread and enjoying one another's company. Or you're an angel of undaunted resolve, you march boldly through the world, fearlessly confronting all challenges. Those kind of descriptions are yet more opportunities for people to emotionally engage with the specific NFTs that they hold. When they find one that resonates, like, that has the right looks and has the right description, they're much more likely to just buy it and hold it forever, which ends up creating the sort of dynamics that end up raising the price of the project over time, which I think is a good thing for any project. I don't think any project wants to set itself up, have a price that goes down over time. First of all, because nobody will want to invest in it. Just like any other kind of fundraising effort, you don't want to create mechanics that drive down the value of your project. You want to do things that drive up the value of the project. And the description is yet another opportunity to do this that most projects don't take at the moment. And I wish they did. There's another theme that feels important to me there, which keeps recurring there, which is about these little details. And so that's the next tip. When I'm evaluating a project, one of the things I look out for is the attention to detail of the founders of the project, of the people who put together the website, who put together the Discord. All these features that we just talked about are opportunities to show that attention to detail, show how much you care about really like making this project really good. And there are ways that great projects differentiate themselves from second-rate projects and also from copycat projects. Cash grab projects often are not going to go to that effort. It's a bit like Nigerian scam emails from a prince in Nigeria and so on. They're full of typos, and the people sending those scam emails don't care. They know that the people that they want to snag are not going to pay attention to the details anymore anyway, because they're going to be blinded by the greed of thinking they're about to get millions of dollars. And the same thing is true for NFT projects. The people who are just following the hype and finding out that, oh, so-and-so big Beanie Maxi, whatever, went and retweeted this thing, so it's definitely going to be huge, I'm going to ape into this. They don't even look at the website. So what's the point of sweating the details? But for the projects that are really worth investing in, I think they tend to sweat every single detail. They tend to really make sure that everything is all right. Is not just all right, is perfect. That's a really great way to differentiate yourself. Now, not everybody is going to have this kind of critical outlook on your project and is going to look at the website, look for typos, look for images that aren't sized properly. I do, because I really want to spare myself from investing in projects that aren't going to make it. A lot of people maybe won't have that attention to detail, also just because that's not how their brain works. I'm the kind of person, when I read the text, if I see a typo, it just stands out like a false note in a melody, and I just kind of jars against my nerves. If I see images that aren't quite the right size, I'm quite sensitive to these little details, and so I pick them up. But even if people don't consciously pick them up, if your project is a bit sketchy, not really that well designed, if there's things that don't quite fit, text that feels sort of like vacuous and doesn't really say anything, even if they don't consciously say, oh yeah, this is a word salad, somebody just wrote some filler text, they didn't really think about it. Even so, they'll pick up a sort of vague sense of unease from looking at your project, and that's more likely to turn them away. Now, some people will still invest despite this vague sense of unease. Maybe something else will counterbalance it, like a hot tip from a friend. But if you're going to do this, you might as well do it right, and you might as well make sure you give your project the best chances to attract all the best investors. And one of the ways you can do that is by conveying your attention to detail through the way your website is built and how much attention you put in the copy and in the strapline, in the words that you use, not using filler text that just doesn't say anything, just making sure every little bit that's there counts. Better to have less than more in that respect. in the Discord as well. If Discord looks like every other Discord, there's nothing unique about it. If the announcements are just random stuff that you'd find on any other Discord, just doesn't show that sort of care and uniqueness that you should want to convey about your project. So I would recommend to founders to think about those details that might seem like small details, but actually make a big difference cumulatively as they add up. This next one is one that I know is very difficult for most founders. And I've been a founder and I started 3 businesses. I ran the third one for 10 years. And it's very hard to start a business. It's very hard to run something like this. You kind of feel sort of lonely and responsible, like you're the only person who has the overall perspective on the project. And therefore you feel kind of this crushing sense of responsibility and loneliness. It's easy to sort of hide behind that and say, no, I'm responsible. I'm the one who knows best. So like, I can't show all these things because people won't be able to handle all this uncertainty that I'm dealing with. Now, there's a word for that, a name for that. It's called a hero complex. And if that's part of your journey, it's part of your journey, and that's okay. And I'm not judging that. But if you want to help your project, if you want to be more successful, it can really help to go and work on that. Maybe talk to some friends, get some therapy. Therapy is very helpful for this. I think everybody should get therapy. Make sure you do the work on yourself so that you are emotionally able to step off your pedestal and realize that you're just one of us. We're all just humans trying to figure out this life thing and trying to make the most out of this life that we have in this world. And just because you're a founder of an NFT project doesn't make you, God's special apple or something. You're just another fucked up human, just like everybody else. And people are okay with that. People respond well to vulnerability. That's been my experience in life. The more you're willing to open up and share yourself, the more people are willing to meet you and get to know you and help you. On the contrary, if you pretend that everything's okay and you don't share what's really happening and you sort of hide behind walls, then people tend to get more distant in response as well. Like the more distant you are, the more distant they get. So I think that's an essential thing that founders can do to increase the chance of their project is work on that and really make an effort to step out of the ivory tower and be part of your community, and not just as somebody who's, handing out news from on high, but somebody who's just part of the community, willing to be vulnerable, willing to share about things that are difficult. That doesn't mean you need to share everything that's happening, that's going wrong in the project all the time, but the willingness to be vulnerable is a really great way to build connections, to build really true, genuine connections with people, and they're much more likely to connect with you and build a relationship with you personally and be very personally engaged in the project through their connection with you if you do that. This is so contrasting from super hype projects where usually the founders are totally inaccessible. There's just some mods that maybe answer questions, and the founders are just so high and mighty and busy with their 100k Discord and 500,000 Twitter followers and stuff that they can't possibly have the time to deal with, those plebeian idiots who are milling around on the Discord and clearly don't know what it takes to be a successful founder. Fuck those guys. Don't be one of those guys. Be a genuine human, and people can build connections with genuine humans. You may find that what you get in return, whether or not the project succeeds, is incredibly valuable. So here's another tip that many projects get wrong and that I wish more projects got right, which is around the art. Now, many projects, maybe the art won't be the most important element, but actually having good, unique art helps you stand out. And even if your project isn't strictly about the art can help your project be more commercially successful. And that's why it's worth getting this right. One way that you can get this wrong is by just not knowing how you work with artists and how you create the environment where an artist can actually create something unique and new. And one of the ways you do that is by basically knowing exactly what you want and then treating the artist as a contractor and saying, okay, I'm going to have wimpy koalas. So I need to find a cartoon artist that's got a reasonably appealing style. And then I'm going to tell them, I need wimpy koalas with 3D glasses. And they definitely need to have beanie hats because I like beanie hats. And they probably need to have medallions and stuff. In fact, I want one full of gold chains or whatever. You just come up with all these kind of ideas by yourself and just pass them over to the artist without really considering what the artist wants to create, what their inspiration is. And that sort of art tends to be not very unique. That doesn't tend to stand out very much. Let's face it, the NFT space is pretty crowded. There's 1 million animal PFPs out there. To stand out, you need something unique. The way to go about that is, instead of seeing it as a contractor relationship where there's the project and the artist just working for the project doing some contract work, See the artist as a partner in co-creating the vision for the project. Find an artist whose style you like, where their style resonates. Don't look for a specific type of thing that they build. Just find somebody where their style just like clicks for you. You're like, yeah, I really love your unique style. So somebody who already has that kind of unique style that you like. Then once you found that artist, and assuming they're open to it and like open to doing a project with you, co-create what the visual language of the project is going to be. Obviously, there are some restrictions, especially if you want it to be usable as an identity, if you want it to have those rarity features that we talked about. But a good artist will engage with that and will be able to understand that. But then they'll use their unique vision on the world to turn those constraints into something that is actually unique because it's based on how they create art rather than on what you want to see. That means relinquishing some control over the artistic direction. But the benefit of that is that you get an art that is actually unique because it starts with an artist that has unique style. Okay, so the next tip is around vesting. And that's something that I've tweeted about endlessly and I've written threads about. And I just can't quite believe that it's not standard yet. So it definitely has to be part of my list of tips for founders. One of the biggest barriers to people buying your project is the fact that there are so many scams in this space. That is why I believe volumes are down whenever there's an excuse for them to be down. Whenever there's something that looks like a slightly more secure investment, people will flee to that instead of NFTs. As soon as ETH starts going up, people leave NFTs, which are very risky because they say like, oh, I can get in on the momentum of this ETH going up, and they abandon the NFT projects that are just much more risky. It could be a scam, like might end up being a rug pull, and it doesn't need to be that way. Like we have the technology to stop this. Like, you know, that's literally what Ethereum was built for. We can build smart contracts that make things impossible to rug. One of the things that needs to be there is some form of vesting mechanism. To have that encoded in the smart contract is such a huge amount of security. It basically means that you can't possibly rug. Chris Dixon has this great line that can't be evil is better than don't be evil. Obviously, he's referencing the famous motto that Google used to have, which they since dropped. They used to have this don't be evil motto. And that was nice. Like it's better than not having that, I guess. But eventually they dropped it. And by the time they dropped it, they were already doing many things that people considered evil. Can't rug is stronger than no, definitely I won't rug. If your smart contract makes it impossible for you to run away with the money, then why wouldn't people trust you? Like you can get the contract audited, you can get people who have a reputation to validate that yes, your smart contract means that basically it's unruggable. Just going to be able to withdraw X amount of money and the NFTs are refundable in various ways. There's all sorts of ways to structure this, and you should give some thought to that. It's worth doing that extra bit of programming to give that security to your investors, because then you'll get more investors and you'll stand out. Like at the moment, there's still only one project that I know of that's done this, which is Curious Addies. Disclaimer, I'm invested in Curious Addies as well. Every project should be doing that. So why doesn't your project do that? Why don't you give that security to investors? Do it, and I think you'll have the benefit of finding investors very easily buy your project because they feel more secure. My next tip is about transparency. This is something that's very dear to my heart. I ran a business for 10 years with total transparency. It's still got total transparency now. But basically, I made a deliberate effort to keep things open. The finances were open. Everybody knows every financial transaction that happens in the business. Salaries are transparent. Expenses are transparent. There's nothing hidden. One of the benefits of being transparent is it builds trust. It builds huge amounts of trust. It's again this of can't be evil versus don't be evil. Like if you don't actively behave transparently with your project, people have to assume or hope that you're actually being honest, that you're spending the money in the way that you say you are. They don't know for sure. That creates uncertainty. That is breeding ground for FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Is breeding ground for people to dump the project because they feel, I'm not so sure about this. Like, I don't know, like they said this, but then this thing, and I don't know, there's no transparency about it. Why put that cost on yourself? Just be transparent. Be actively transparent. This is 2022. It shouldn't be that hard to have somebody on your project just keep a log of the major expenses and make sure that those are published in the Discord and on the website once a month so that investors know roughly what you're spending the money on. It's such an easy win, and it will help. Like it will help build trust with people in the project. They'll know what you're doing. They know what you're up to. Does this mean they'll also know when you spend some money and it doesn't work out? Yeah. For this, I'd refer you back to my previous tip about being vulnerable. I don't think anybody who's reasonable in any way expects that projects will get everything right all the time. There's always going to be some things that go wrong. Obviously, if you get everything wrong all the time, then people will have questions, but they probably should have questions. But so long as you get things right mostly, that's good enough. As a business owner, I made loads of mistakes, some of which cost, in my estimation, millions of pounds in the end. And the business is still alive and it's got 40 employees, is doing well. You can survive a lot of mistakes so long as you get enough of the stuff right. Having your investors abandon ship because they don't trust you, because you're not transparent about what you're doing, is not a mistake that you need to make. So don't make that one. Another cool idea, cool tip that you can adopt on your project that I believe makes a lot of sense is loaning. This was pioneered by Meta Angels. As far as I know, they're currently the only project that's implemented this. And it makes so much sense that it's, again, one of those things that every project should be implementing. The reason why it makes a lot of sense is that if you implement loaning, it's a bit like a staking mechanism. So you might have seen a lot of projects go and do this staking thing where they're trying to artificially limit supply by giving you some kind of bullshit excuse for why you need to stake in order to earn some token that is kind of a Ponzinomics token. And anyway, I'm not going to rant about that, but staking tends to be an artificial way to manipulate the floor. Loaning is a very legitimate way to reduce supply. So I've got 13 Meta Angels, for example, between me and my wife. I've got friends that I want to get into NFTs. Meta Angels is a wonderful project to do that. I don't want to send them the NFT because it's worth quite a lot of money. Like at this point in time, Meta Angels are worth about $1,500. What if their wallet gets hacked and they don't have ledgers and stuff? Like I don't want to take the risk of losing an asset that's valuable to me just to allow a friend to use this project. But with loaning, I can just loan them the NFT and they can use it as if it was theirs, but they're not able to sell it or transfer it or lose control of it. I can recall it whenever I want. That means that that NFT that I've loaned out is now locked up, being used by someone. And I'm much less likely to go and say, right, I'm going to just dump it now. It's extra effort to go to my friend and say, actually, I'm going to have to recall that NFT because I've decided to get out of the project. I will still do it if I decide that I want to get out of the project, but it creates that extra barrier, which is, what staking usually has done. Except with loaning, it's very legitimate. And not only that, but it also brings more people into the project. I'm not going to loan my NFT to somebody who isn't a good fit for the project, because why would I waste my time doing that? So the people I might loan my Meta Angels to are people who would benefit from being on Meta Angels or who would be able to help others on Meta Angels, people who might actually enjoy this project. So I'm kind of attracting additional ideal members to the community, which makes the community stronger. So it's a huge benefit to the project to implement this. It's one of those ideas that I think seems so obvious in hindsight. You kind of wonder why nobody's done it before. And now it's done. Meta Angels launched a couple of weeks ago. The smart contract is publicly visible. There's no excuse for not implementing it if you're launching a project now. Other than if you're launching a project right now, just as you watch this video, maybe, you might need a bit of time and it might not be worth delaying your launch, or it might be worth delaying your launch to add that function. But if you're launching your project quite a while after this video has come out, you should just have loaning. There's just no downside and there's loads of benefits. So consider that for your project. And of course, there's actually even more creativity that can be had there. So Meta Angels implemented loaning with no financial component because the project is all about helping people. And so renting NFTs would not quite make sense. But if you think about it, there's a lot of unexplored potential there in the ability to rent NFTs out to other people for payments. You might use something like superfluid.finance to have a kind of continuous payment coming back from loaning the NFT. I imagine if part of the income source, part of the passive income source from owning Genesis Kongs or whatever other project you might value greatly might be that you can loan it out to people who want to be part of the community but can't afford the NFT and they sort of rent it from you. Why not enable that for your holders? Like if one of your holders has like 10 of your very precious NFTs and they can loan them out and get some income for themselves and maybe even split the income with the project. There's so many creative ideas that can be explored there that haven't been explored yet. So if this makes sense for your project, I think you should definitely consider it. We're getting towards the end of this, and one of the last tips that I want to share is make sure you actually use the latest, most efficient technology when building your project. At this point in time, this means using ERC721A, for example. If you don't know, so ERC721 is the standard that is used for minting NFTs. It's most people's implementations are based on the Open Zeppelin contract, which is an open source version of ERC721, which works well enough, but has some very big inefficiencies, particularly as the project scales up. And that's led to your typical mint a few months ago being basically like when gas was reasonably high, just minting even a free NFT might cost $100+ in gas fees. It turns out that that was entirely unnecessary. That was just an artifact of bad coding, or nobody having thoughts that, hey, maybe it doesn't need to cost so much to mint an NFT. The people at the Azuki project, apart from having all sorts of other innovations and uniqueness in their project, also did this innovation that I think they've labeled ERC721A, which is basically a much more efficient way to do the minting that costs just a lot less. Meta Angels also copied this, and I remember when I minted them, I minted 10 at once, and it cost me $40 of gas. And I couldn't believe that there were free mints a few months earlier where I paid $100 for each NFT that I minted. Meanwhile, Meta Angels, the gas wasn't even that low when I minted Meta Angels, and it still was only $40 of gas. So that seems like an absolute no-brainer. And yet, I'm sure there's many project founders out there who don't know about this. So I wanted to include this in this list of tips. And as a final tip, as we're getting towards the end of this video, one of the things that I've noticed happen on many projects, which feels quite important, which founders should think about earlier rather than later, because it can happen quite suddenly and damage the project otherwise, is thinking about ways to discourage floor talk on your project. Now, it's natural for people to get excited when the project that they invest in goes up. I do that as well. Like one of the things I do each day is I use an app called Floored and I check the price of my projects. And yeah, when the price goes up, I'm more excited. Like, I'm human. That's part of the fun of investing in something like NFTs, to be able to see them just taking off to the moon. And it's a great feeling. Less great feeling when it goes down. But what is definitely not helpful is to have your general channel, which is usually the first impression that new potential buyers get of your project, be swamped by people who are just talking about the floor price. It creates a very bad impression. For me, like, I don't often buy projects on secondary, but if I joined a project Discord that I was considering buying and I saw that all that people are talking in the general channel, all that they're talking about is the floor price, that would be a strong don't buy signal. Probably if you are in a project and you see people just talking about the floor price endlessly in the general chat, it's probably at least a short-term trading signal to sell, because that means that the project has been overrun by flippers who are looking for short-term momentum. And as soon as that momentum dies out, and it will always die out, it just physically cannot keep going up forever. And as soon as that momentum dies down, the price will start to dip, and then those flippers will panic, and they'll start undercutting, and they'll undercut. Probably they'll over undercut before it bounces back to where it actually should be. And you can stop that. You don't need to have that problem. All you need to do is make sure that you discourage floor talk on your general channel. Simple patterns of this include just having a channel for floor talk. But actually, I think the stronger pattern, which I've seen only on one project, which is Crypto Coven, is to just create a really strong culture of, we don't care about this stuff. This is not what this project is about. And if you want to discuss this, please do it elsewhere. Don't do it on our Discord. If you've spent the time to build your community slowly and you've ingrained that idea in the community that we don't care about the floor price, like which Crypto Coven did, they ingrained that we don't care about the floor price, we don't care about Rarity, not that kind of project. They made sure that all their active members understood this. When then there was a kind of invasion of short-term flippers, those people kind of gently but firmly got told, no, we don't want this kind of conversation here. Please stop talking about this. And they did. They stopped. People don't want to just, talk about stuff just to piss people off. It's just that they see one person talking about the floor, and then the next person gets excited and gets like, yes, like we're definitely going to the moon. And then another one posts a GIF, and then it just keeps going like this, and they build on each other's excitement without any kind of ill intent. But the result is the price goes up parabolically and then collapses back down. And more importantly than that, because short-term volatility is not necessarily such a terrible thing to have happen, it's short-term volatility. But more importantly than that, if any of your potential ideal members join the Discord around that time and they see that all that people talk about here is the floor price, they'll probably just turn away and go somewhere else. Not only you get the short-term volatility, but you also lose out on some potential great community members. And that's a shame. Like, that's a mistake that doesn't need to happen. So think about this early enough and start ingraining those principles in the project early enough, if that makes sense for you. So this is the last segment. I'm quite excited because this is the last segment of my very first YouTube video that I'm going to edit. Let's see how it goes. Let's see how whether anybody actually likes this. And if you do, if you've watched this far, I would really appreciate if you told me in a comment or a tweet or somehow let me know, because this has been quite a bit of work, and I haven't even started the editing yet. So I'd appreciate the feedback. To summarize the tips, and hopefully I'll do some kind of animation that also shows the text while I'm saying this. The tips are: say yes only to what makes sense for your project. Define your ideal members so you can make sure to attract them. Have a unique profile picture for each token so that people can emotionally engage and use it for marketing. Go for a slow, grind-free, low-hype build towards the mint so that you build the right kind of solid community that's not going to fall apart as soon as the hype dies down. Leverage rarity and difference between the PFPs. Don't make them all look the same, and allow some of them to look more special than others. Avoid trades that look lame. Name your NFTs. Show your care in the naming of them. Add interesting descriptions as well. Invest in those little details that make the project look more polished, that make it look like somebody really cares about the project. Engage with the community. Step off your pedestal. Join the community. Be human. Have unique, beautiful art by treating the artist as a partner rather than as a contractor. Implement smart contract enforced vesting, because why wouldn't you give your investors that security? Be transparent to build trust with your investors and customers. Implement loaning so that more ideal members can be drawn to your project, and so that supply is locked up in productive users, even when some people have multiple NFTs in your project. Make sure you're up to date with the technological side and implement ERC 721A at this point, and maybe by the time you watch this video, it'll be 721B, but make sure you're up to date. And finally, discourage the floor talk, because it leads to turning away ideal members and to just short-term price fluctuations that are not very productive. That's all for today. Thank you very much for listening. GM, wherever you are, GM, and good luck. Have a lovely day. Bye.